Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, as the case might be. Excuse me while I try to find this chat over here for the AMA. My chat's being a little weird here. Hello, how are you all doing? We'll be right with you. Make sure my volume's down, everything, and now here we go. Okay, let's go to this way. Nope, that's not working. There we go. Hello, this is going to be the AMA, building a community, managing influencers, all the things you need to do for your crowdfunding campaign. I'm going to go ahead and start, talking about things. I'll give you all a few minutes to acclimate, to show up, to all those fun things. But in the meantime, I'm going to start talking about, The Witcher. The Witcher Path of Destiny, just briefly for a few minutes, because The Witcher Path of Destiny just launched over on the Gamefound platform, and is currently, I believe, at just crossed $500,000 in the first hour of it being up, which bodes well for the campaign, because $500,000 in the first hour is definitely a good number to hit. We'll see where it is in terms of, at the end of day one. In general, fun stat around Gamefound, crowdfunding in general to a degree, but Gamefound specifically stats as well, is generally what a campaign raises in its first day of crowdfunding is usually somewhere around 30%, 35%, and it does vary. There's an average of how much it'll raise across the entire campaign. So if it hits, 2 million in day one, that means there's a decent chance of hitting 6 million across the entire campaign. Those are just some fun numbers. They're not a guarantee. Very often it is community based as well. Different communities have their own type of engagement to a degree. To a certain extent, if you have a hardcore, passionate fan base that is there for your game day one, if you've built that type of community. So for example, Ivy Games is a good example of this, where Ivy Games, they have a very passionate fan base, but that means their day one funding is a higher percentage of their total on their campaigns in general, because all their people show up day one. So just some random stats around, just some things and crowdfunding, all those things. But that's not today's focus. Today's focus is an AMA around community, influencers, managing all the things you need to do to run up to your campaign, to try to get your campaign to where it needs to be. I will be watching chat, so if you have any specific questions at any point, by all means, just ask away. But outside of that, I'll just be starting to talk about community, about those things, because I think there are a lot of companies that manage community in an excellent way. They build their communities in an excellent way, and they set themselves up to be completely primed for success by the time their campaign launches. I think there are many that don't do that, and sometimes it's because of a lack of knowledge, sometimes it's because of a lack of time, sometimes it's because of a lack of just resources and being able to focus on any number of different things. But generally, one of the things, when I've been asked, and obviously, I have my YouTube channel, I've been running and covering crowdfunding for a long time as well, but one of the questions I get asked a lot by creators who are working with me is how to have a successful campaign, what to do, what are the things that they should do to boost their numbers. And one of the more common answers I give them, although I give the disclaimer that it's a lot of work, and sometimes by the time you're asking me it's too late, is around building community. It is around the idea that if you build an audience before you ever get to your crowdfunding campaign, you are set up for success. My printer's doing the done printing noises because I just printed like a 40-page rulebook, so it's making some noises in the background there. But yeah, building your community is a big part of it. Building your community in terms of getting people who are there and don't feel like they're just being sold to because they feel invested. And that is a slow process. And this, this is primarily AMA, so whatever you want to ask, but I will be talking about community and influencers, working with all of that. But getting people to feel invested is a big part of the conversation. So some of the most successful campaigns I've seen from first-time creators who are not working with previous projects and they're not working with an IP, usually those campaigns do incredibly well if they have sat there and built the community beforehand, if they have sat there and done the legwork, if they have sat there and posted in Facebook groups, but in a way that doesn't come across as salesy, in a way that builds community, builds engagement, and builds emotional investment into what they're doing. And there are a variety of campaigns I can point to that have done this, but when you do something like, let's say you have your game coming up and you want to sit there and try to get people invested, posting a picture of some various art that you have for your game. Just show some cards, show some different things you're considering. Ideally being genuine in actual things you're facing as a creator of like, hey, by the way, here are 2 different formats for the way we structured some of the things on these cards. Which do you like better and why? Looking for feedback. Here's a box cover we're talking about in the office. There are 4 different box covers. Here are the 4 different ones. What do you think of the font? Which of these do you like the most, okay? Do you have complaints or concerns about the font? Trying to work or interact with people, with the communities you're engaging in, going into various Facebook groups. There's some very large Facebook groups out there. There's Board Game Revolution, there's Crowdfunding Nerds, there's the board game group, there's BGG has a group, I believe, Dice Towers group. There's a ton of groups you can be in, and most of those groups don't want to feel sold to. They don't want you to drop your link and leave. but they are fine helping and contributing towards that sense of community. I ran a convention last year, Level Up Retreat. We ran a convention, we're doing again this year, but we did engage with Facebook posts, and the most engaging posts that we had, the ones we had hundreds and hundreds of comments on certain posts, because it wasn't like, hey, here's Level Up Retreat, please come to it. It was, hey, what are the things you like to see most at conventions? We're running a convention, we're trying to get your feedback. What are the things you like to see most? Engaging in people in a way that pulls them in, builds that degree of emotional investment. When they come to your crowdfunding campaign 7 months later and they see a box art that they voted for or against, there is that sense of familiarity. It's not a new project on crowdfunding that they have to decide whether they do or don't want. It's something that they already know it exists. A sense of familiarity for something that doesn't even exist yet, which is something that's up to you to build and to grow. The Brother Slim, thank you for this. Speaking to building a community, is there a recommended time frame to get going before launch? Oh, that's a tough one. The answer there is a range. It's a large range. But I would say, generally, 3 months to a year. Meaning if you go too far out, you run the risk, and there's no perfect answer here. There's just generic answers to a degree. But if you go too far out, you run the risk of burning out your community that you sat there and built and developed. You run the risk of burning them out on the thing that isn't ever showing up. I can point to multiple crowdfunding campaigns in theory that are coming one day that I've been aware of and been tracking for years. And I'm not excited about them anymore. I was excited when I first found out about them, but I'm just not excited about them anymore because it's been like 3 years and these games aren't coming. And so I'm kind of like, okay, great. They exist. Maybe at some point in the future, I don't know. And so I think if you go too far out, you run the risk of kind of building up. And it's no different than when you're actually delivering your crowdfunding project. You know, if I get my crowdfunding project in a year, I'm still excited about it. If I get it in 3 years, there is a higher percentage ratio of drop-off, of mental drop-off of, oh yeah, I backed this 3 years ago. I'm so done with it by now. And so that is something to be mindful of. But the flip side is if you do too soon, if you try to do it in the first month, that's good, but the more time you have to build it, the better. On Gamefound in general, we recommend that you have your pre-launch page. We recommend that is up at least a month before your campaign. It's not a requirement, it's not a necessity, but we do recommend it. And part of the reason we recommend it is because our data shows that the longer you have that up, to a degree, at least a month is like a threshold to a degree, but there's roughly a month is a good threshold of at least have that much engagement, at least have that much of a place where you could build the community. And it is a place you can build your community. I do recommend engaging in Facebook groups. I do recommend that for sure, but having your pre-launch page up and ready to go is another place where you can build it. Play Deliverance, hey Alex, how's it going? Evangelos, hi Alex, how are you? Board Game Revolution, it's never too soon to start, but definitely 2 to 3 months in advance, no less. 100% agreed. And Board Game Revolution, for those watching, is one of those groups I mentioned already, as far as being one of the larger, more active Facebook groups out there. Then again, it goes back to what I said a second ago, like don't advertise. Not only is it against the rules of many of these groups, but it doesn't do you any favors. Engage. Ask questions, engage, show pictures, build that emotional investment from those people, because by the time they show up at your crowdfunding page, there is a sense of familiarity. Play Deliverance. I'd love to know the latest numbers on Gamefound's organic traffic and other stats. General estimates are okay. Also, do you think you're going to overtake Kickstarter in 3 years? Oh, fun questions. So, any numbers I'm asked for doing this entire AMA, I will have to, some of them I know offhand, others I don't, so anything I'll happily follow up on. If you send me an email at a.radcliffe@gamefound.com. But as far as our general stats, I believe the last time I checked, it was in the range of 1.5 to 2 million unique visitors every single month. It does range for sure. We just crossed 1 million active registered users, but we had 1.5 million to 2 million unique visitors a month. As far as do you think you're going to overtake Kickstarter in 3 years? 3 years is an ambitious number. And first of all, we'll never overtake Kickstarter in the larger ecosystem. Never's a tough word, but in general. But within the tabletop space, I do believe that Gamefound is... not I believe, this is a fact. Gamefound is growing year over year, and Kickstarter's tabletop category is on a decline. And again, my numbers are a little out of date here, but the last time I checked, Gamefound was up 75% year over year, and Kickstarter was down 12%. That's not a 100% fair comparison, because Gamefound's still new, which means that a lot of our growth is just coming from the fact that we're still establishing that foothold in the market. So it's not a pure indicator of our long-term growth over time. I don't think we're going to see 75% growth every single year. I will say that this year has also seen a lot of growth on the platform, and a big increase in public perception of where your project could be or should be. This goes to community. One of the things you want to be mindful of, and this works against Gamefound as well, but this is what you should be mindful of, is listen to your potential backers. If your potential backers are saying that they want the game on Kickstarter, listen to them. This is about building community. This is not about building Gamefound. So you should listen to your community as far as what they want and where they want. One of the things that has been very helpful in that sense, and it's a currently unfair advantage that I hope Gamefound maintains for a long time, but it probably won't. It probably will be developed on other platforms. Is stretch pay has been a huge feature that so many people have asked for and adopted with such a degree of embracing the feature, embracing the potential of what stretch pay allows you to buy these $400 all-ins while managing to stagger your budget so it's evenly distributed across whatever your gaming budget might be. And we've seen a lot of people on a lot of platforms pushing for creators to use Gamefound just because of stretch pay alone. It gives backers a lot of tools and a lot of engagement. But listen to your community, wherever they want to be, wherever they want the project to be. But going back to the question, so do I think that Gamefound will overtake Kickstarter in 3 years? I think so. But there's a lot of question marks. There's a lot of question marks in crowdfunding in general right now. I mean, if you look at the numbers on crowdfunding, overall backer numbers, overall, in general, in crowdfunding right now, there are a lot of people who are not seeing the same degree of rise in their projects. It used to be a reprint campaign and an expansion was almost guaranteed to make more money. That is far from the case nowadays. It's far from the case. Regardless of what platform you're on, it's far from the case. But I've seen, and again, anything I say, please take into account throughout this entire video that I do work for Gamefound, that bias exists, but in general, I think the stumbles I've seen this past year have been more on Kickstarter's side, which has led to more consumer confidence in Gamefound. It's led to more creators and more backers pushing for Gamefound to be their platform of choice. And that does mean that assuming we can maintain that snowball effect, assuming we can hold on to that, assuming there are not major missteps or things along the way, I do believe within the tabletop category, if you give it 3 years, I think there's a decent chance that we've crossed that 51% threshold in the tabletop category. Not necessarily across the board, although it's tricky as well because the tabletop category includes a lot of other things, not just board games. I think in terms of the more board game focused audience, which is a hard term to define, but I think many of you watching probably know what I'm talking about. I think to a large extent there's a continued growth in Gamefound. But there's a lot of things that go under tabletop that aren't necessarily viewed the same way. Even RPGs for that matter. Like RPGs are a category Gamefound is still working on growing and we're a little behind in that. And so in terms of the full tabletop category, it's a little harder to say. In terms of the general public perception of where the big board game campaigns are, I think we'll cross that threshold. We have the Brother Slim, thank you. Board Game Revolution, share the story, 100%. 100% share the story. That's a big part of it. You're not wrong at all. The idea that like that investment goes past asking them questions about the artwork, the box, the presentation, you know, what pledge levels they want to see. Does this feel like that much or this not? Like there's a campaign right now, Galactic Cruise, I want to say. That's a recent campaign, a recent example, but they're doing an excellent job. And I think they're launching on Kickstarter, if I'm not mistaken, but I've seen them in all the groups, in Board Game Revolution, everywhere else, and they've been asking questions about everything. They've been interacting with the publishers, with designers, with various crowdfunding groups. They've been interacting in so many ways, sharing art, sharing when they show their games. When they show their games to anyone, they have a chance, like, hey, we got a chance to be at this convention. We had a chance to show the game to this influencer. Whatever degree of things that are going on, people who would never know who this guy, like, and there are so many campaigns that launch every single day that so many people who aren't aware of everything going on in crowdfunding just don't even realize exists. But in the case of Galactic Cruise, so many more people will have a sense of familiarity and immediate acknowledgement because they've been involved in so many of the questions and so much of the story and so much of what has led them to that point. You want to invest people in everything about who you are, and that story part is an important thing because it moves you past the range of just being sold to. If you understand why someone's creating a game, where they're coming from, how this game was developed, all these things, it really puts that personal feel on things, which I think personal feel is one of the things that happens in crowdfunding. It's not always there. There are people in crowdfunding for any number of reasons, but that personal connection, that feeling of involvement, that sense of building something is part of the crowdfunding journey and can be a huge part of where you can stand out effectively. Play Deliverance. What activities do you think makes the biggest difference in an individual campaign's organic traffic? In particular, what sort of thing can an individual exercise control over versus going viral? Biggest difference in an individual's campaign organic traffic. I think, yeah, it depends what you're defining as organic traffic, because if we're ignoring your own past audience, meaning your own people who are already there because you exist, we're obviously ignoring any paid anything because that's not the organic traffic. I think it's probably everything I said there. The idea of building that community, the idea that you want to bring people to your page. And there's a few ways people get to your page. They get there from the whatever crowdfunding platform you're on, the tools that are on that platform, the recommending, algorithms on the platforms will definitely push people there. But in terms of the organic traffic that just people who are going to show up for your page, I think the biggest thing is that sense of community. I think that the biggest thing is that sense of involvement. You can do it through a ton of different ways. You can build email lists. You should build email lists. You should engage in the platforms. I think community is the thing. Board Game Revolution. Backers love to hear a backstory and what inspired creators to make the projects. 100%. I think that was based on timestamps. I think that was said when I was saying that. Roberto. Being active in the Board Game Design Lab is great as well. The community is so helpful and there's a great wealth of experience there. For sure. And there's so many different aspects here because there are different groups in different ways. And they all have overlap in so many different categories. There's a group for board game, I can't remember the name of the group, but it's selling to retailers effectively, where you have companies who are connecting with retailers to sell their product. I think it's important to be there. It's important to get that feedback, and for a variety of reasons. Any group you're in, understand that there's so many different reasons why you're there. There's so many different things you'll get out of it. When you're in a group talking about selling your game to retailers, you may decide to not have a retail pledge at all. You may decide that your numbers don't work, it doesn't make sense, you won't be able to offer them a good enough deal, and that's fine. But even through posting there, we have to realize this is a small space, comparatively speaking. When you post in the selling to retailers group, you are not just reaching store owners, you are reaching people who play games too on a regular basis. So whether or not you actually end up having a retail pledge, you're still building that knowledge, that investment, that involvement. And it means that when they're sitting there deciding whether your project with its various, exclusives that it has is worth backing, even if you don't have a retailer pledge, there is more of an awareness. You're going to get that out of the conversation. In Board Game Design Lab, you're going to get a lot of information. You're going to get a lot of advice. And again, you still have a lot of backers. All these groups have tons of people who are, there's thousands of creators, thousands of retailers, thousands of publishers. All these groups have so much overlap in different areas. And so even when you're posting for one reason or another, you'll get a lot of things out of it. When you post for feedback on that box cover, you're not just engaging a community, you're actually getting valid feedback on what seems to resonate. So you're not, it's both things. That's the whole point. The whole point is these things are genuine, but they are helpful to you in so many different ways. It's not just about, hey, I'm going to post something and I'm going to pull people in. The one of those like tropes that's is present is one of those tropes that's constantly around is the idea that being honest or true to yourself or genuine is the best way to do things, and that's because it's true. If you approach these things, if you post a photo of a card art that you already decided on to a group just because you're trying to engage with them, you can do that. It will work to a degree. But why would you not take that feedback into account? If you decided on, art B and you show them art A and they like art A, you should listen to that. Like, it's one of those things where most of the reasons that you're going to be engaging are going to be genuine opportunities to actually get something out of it. You want to be authentic. You want to be transparent with your community. You want to build trust with them by being open. You want to build engagement with them by listening and responding. When a bunch of people see that they chose option B and then 2 weeks later you're showing them option B, but now you're asking about the font size, those people feel more connected. They had a part in building your project, and so they are more invested. The big thing about community is that sense of investment, because engagement, investment, these are things you can't put a dollar sign on, because when it's just about dollars, backers are just going to go wherever the best way to get your game is, which is obviously a factor in how you build your campaign, how you price your campaign, the exclusives you give. Those all should be conversations. But engagement, community, attachment, emotional investment, those are all things that's how you build a community. There are many companies out there that have passionate communities. They've done a great job, and in that sense of community as well, by the way, it carries through past your initial campaign. It carries through to how you engage on crowdfunding. There's a company, what's it called? Lazy Squire Games. Lazy Squire Games is fascinating in the sense that they've had some of their issues because their projects tend to be delayed. They've been on Kickstarter, they've been on Gamefound. Their projects have not had the best timelines. But when they run crowdfunding campaigns, if I recall correctly, every single comment gets a reply. Every single comment throughout the entire campaign gets a reply. I don't know if they've maintained that across all their campaigns, but I know it was a thing that they did once upon a time. And so the idea that you can, and this happened to me on my YouTube channel as well when I first started doing it, where when I first started, I replied to every single comment because I could. I was able to keep up back then. And I think those things build a sense of investment. I think when you as a backer know that your comment is getting a reply from the creator, it builds that sense of, you heard from me. And it also lowers some of the tension when things go wrong. That's another thing about community. Another big benefit of community is it puts a lot of grease on the wheels when things go wrong on your project. When you have a more, value relationship with your audience, where you're like, hey, back this because of this, but you're not there for them, when you're not engaging with them, it does mean that when things go wrong, when you have to ask them a question about, hey, by the way, I'm sorry, the games are a little delayed, and we'd love to sell these at Gen Con, but we also told you to get the games first. What do we do with that? Are you okay with that? if you've built that community, if you've actually built a sense of engagement and trust with them, you'll get a whole lot more support. When your games are delayed in general, when there's a stretch goal that doesn't actually have the linen cards because it turned out that was really just way more complicated than you thought it would be, whatever these things are, if you have people who are there for you, it greases the wheels so much on all the things that could and frequently do go wrong in crowdfunding. So it's not just about how you get more funding initially, it's also about how that translates into a larger engaged audience. Again, there are so many companies that have passionate audiences. There's Ivy Games, there's Orange Nebula, there's Awaken Realms, there's so many companies. I'm just mentioning a handful. I'm not in any way trying to exclude anyone. Those are just some that come to mind. But they are companies that have built passionate audiences that are there for them day one. And it's not just about that first campaign. It's about how you engage with the community the entire way through. How you treat them as not just dollar signs, but people who you're trying to work with to build good, fun board games. Play Deliverance. Let's see. Another question. I came prepared. Compare Gamefound to Backkit's crowdfunding platform. What do you know that you can compare and contrast? Is there any area Backkit can compete? Ooh, okay. So, again, disclaimer, work for Gamefound, all those things. I mean, we're here, but I want to be always as publicly clear. I'm coming in with a bias. Backkit's platform is still iterating. So the first thing I'll say is that Backkit's platform is still new and it's still iterating. In fact, Kickstarter as well. Kickstarter is finally iterating as well. I think Backkit is more of a potential threat in the iteration aspect of how they're developing it because they're still new. They don't have all that, what's the word for it? Is it called development debt? I think it's something that there's a term for it. It's not development debt, but it's something with the word debt, programmatic debt. I don't remember the exact term. But either way, the idea that when you build a certain infrastructure and you have so much present, it's harder and harder to actually make changes. So even when Kickstarter does make changes, a lot of them are kind of built in ways that aren't as immediately intuitive because the system is built a certain way. It's always harder to build off of that. Backkit, on the other hand, I think they are making changes, and they are making changes relatively fast. Not necessarily as fast as I think Gamefound is, but I think they are still adjusting and making changes to the platform and adding things. So for example, one area that I used to say about Gamefound that is no other platform can compete in is Gamefound is a platform that when you browse on Gamefound, you can browse for late pledges. To the best of my knowledge, the other platforms that I've seen, and again, if they've changed and I've missed it, then they've changed and I missed it. But to the best of my knowledge, the other platforms don't have that. You have to have a link to the project. You have to get the link. You have to go to the project. You can't just browse it like an e-commerce store. I've had people tell me on calls with creators when I'm talking with the platform, I've had creators be like, oh yeah, I just backed Tamashi, 2 weeks ago and I thought it was an active project. I didn't even realize it was been closed and, whatever. I've had that conversation. That means people are on the platform and whether they know it or not, they have the opportunity to browse for things that are available, but you didn't have to have a link to get there. Why would you want to gate your commerce content? Like, why would you ever want that? And so, for a long time, that was a pro for just Gamefound alone. Recently, Backkit finally implemented, I believe, where you can now browse their active late pledges. You don't need a link, you can browse it. Now, I still think Gamefound system is better. We have filters, we have tools, it's all more board game focused. I've tried browsing the Backkit's like browse all late pledges, but they have such a large, they don't have the tools and filters in place yet, and they're such a larger category, it's not just tabletop, that for me, that's not that helpful yet. But it's still an area that I think there'll be adjustments, I think there'll be iterations, and I think they'll grow through. I think Backkit does have it's hard. I think there are a lot of pros and cons to different platforms. I have heard that the Pledge Manager, for example, Pledge Manager is a trickier one because I haven't directly run a Pledge Manager myself, but that's an area where I've heard more that Backkit might be more competitive in, and also RPGs, and not more competitive, meaning more equal. I've had a lot of people say that they love Gamefound's Pledge Manager. I've had some creators say they prefer Backkit's Pledge Manager, so at least there is that knowledge that you should have. But I don't have a direct, as a backer, as someone who utilizes the platform, to me, I don't have anything about Backkit that I prefer. And again, I'll say, for example, I'll say there are things about Kickstarter that I do prefer. I can't say that there's anything about Backkit that I prefer over Gamefound as a backer. So it's harder to say in that case. I think they are more competitive in the RPG audience, so that's an area. If you're running an RPG, I think you should look at Backkit. I'd love to have you on the Gamefound platform. I'd love to have you have a talk with us, but I think you should also look at Backkit because their numbers are good when it comes to their RPG audience that they have built. With Kickstarter, for example, I think Kickstarter has various small things, quality of life upgrades, I'd say, that I think are useful. Obviously, Kickstarter is an app. A lot of people do want the app. There's many reasons Gamefound does not have an app. A lot of it is because we're constantly developing. We're putting out updates every 2 weeks. And so, you don't have two simultaneous development queues, what slow us down. A lot of it's the apps are not necessarily used as much. But for those who want an app, then Kickstarter has an app. The updates are a little bit more browsable. Gamefound, you have to go into the URL and change the number of the update. You can't just filter. I think stretch goals are an interesting one because I think stretch goals on Gamefound, the way they have them in an actual light box that you can pop up and navigate and put things in, I think that's both incredible and also loses a little of the charm that a PDF scrollable page that is terrible and useless, I think it loses some of that charm. And what I've actually seen creators do on Gamefound, which I think is a good idea, is they've done both. They've had these stretch goals, but then they still include the graphic of the PDF slow updates. I think it's a good idea. It gives that sense of charm of, oh, look at the things we're unlocking, but you have the better functionality if you want that too. So I think there are pros and cons about different platforms for sure. It is a hard thing to say because of the nature of bias and present, but I am less confident in BackerKit as a crowdfunding competitor in its current state. That's a perception I get from community members who I'm talking to as well. Whenever I'm talking to somebody else, the conversation is always Kickstarter versus Gamefound. It's not really BackerKit versus Gamefound when it comes to crowdfunding, at least not now. That can change, but at least not now for me. Board Game Revolution, solo gamers, BG41 on the rise. Yeah, that group is incredibly active. It's so fascinating. The idea of an entire dedicated Facebook group for solo gamers to interact with each other is such a hilarious concept in general. I mean, it makes sense. It's funny to think of that disconnect of like, hey, we're all here to play games alone. Let's talk about it together. But it is a very active group. Play Deliverance. Gamefound's advantages over Kickstarter to me. Every follow gets project updates. Yes. Every follow gets project. Yes, 100%. So that's a big part about the nature of the long-term engagement with your followers, because of the fact that on Kickstarter, once the campaign's over, you've lost that person. If they haven't backed, you can no longer connect with them. On Gamefound, if they follow the campaign until they manually unfollow, which you can do, but most backers don't do, most followers don't do, they're going to continue to get updates. When you show those cool minis you finally got samples for the factory, and you say, hey, late pledge closing in a month, a bunch of people get notified. They're there for the entire journey. That is present. That, by the way, would be an advantage of BackerKit over Kickstarter as well, that continued life cycle and engagement. 2 project comments before launch get engagement. Yes, 100%. That goes to the community aspect. Kickstarter, you can't really as easily build community on Kickstarter. The closest thing you can get is you can do those pages where you kind of share the entire page and ask for feedback, and you could have some degree of that. I don't see that utilized that often. I do think it's a good tool to use when you're on Kickstarter. It comes at the cost of it's not as easy to share and communicate in ways that aren't just like complete transparency. So you don't have like on Gamefound, you have that, you have a complete preview page that could be exactly what you want it to be and is separate from your project page. So it really lets you fully customize that experience. But Kickstarter does have that tool where you can share the page itself and like ask for feedback. And I think it is a useful tool for building community, building engagement. The problem is it's just the best they have because they don't have a real preview page and engagement. You can show some graphics before launch, stats and updates. Oh, stats and updates. First of all, showing graphics before launch, 100%. Stats and updates is a big deal. The idea that you can have statistics on how your update affected things, whether you put it on update, whether you lost backers from it, whether backers upgraded their pledge. The idea that you have those stats and updates, it's one of my favorite stat features that we have on the platform because of how closely it connects to action items. There's a term out there, vanity stats. The idea that you look at a bunch of graphs and bars and it doesn't actually tell you anything you need to know. Meaning the idea that numbers look good, but they don't lead to actionable information is a vanity stat. Okay, great, the numbers look good. What are you going to do with that information? Nothing, they just look good. Having numbers that translate into things you are going to do, or even things you won't do, is a big part of things. Knowing that your average Gamefound campaign does fund, 30 to 35% day one funding of what you get, that's an actionable item, because if you have a number where you're looking at the project and you need to know if you need to cancel it by, being able to have that information is an action, is something that's useful, even if it results in no action, because it gave you that knowledge. So, but in general, the update stats to me are so directly correlated with knowledge. Seeing, like, if you post an update that has an optional buy in it, that's a big thing, and you can see how much that optional buy affected additional backers, how much it's changed things. If you post an all-in pledge, you can see how many people you pulled in. That is actionable information for the future of, hey, you know what? Our all-in pledge that gave you a $30 discount, turns out, yeah, that brought in 2 more backers, but everyone else lowered their pledges, and we actually lost money in that. That gives you actual information for the future, at the very least, as far as how you engage with the community. And if you post something that has a misstep, if you post something about the campaign in some way, I don't know, whatever it is, maybe you're like, hey, we're posting solo mode as a stretch goal, and you lose backers, you're like, oh, turns out maybe people don't want solo mode as a stretch goal, maybe they want to bait in, and that actually made them lose confidence in the project. It gives you actionable information, which I love. I think it's incredible. Play Deliverance. Board Game Revolution, Orange Nebula, Chip Theory are good examples of community builders, 100%. Those are both companies. It's fascinating. Those are both companies. Orange Nebula, Chip Theory, Ivy Games, they're all examples of companies that have tremendous degree of engagement, but that means tremendous degree of day one pull-in and a little bit less over time because they've built such passionate audiences that are there for them no matter what. And there for them no matter what means a bunch of things. Like Orange Nebula is a good example where, again, that community aspect where they post things, like they have their own Facebook group, and this is a good thing to do. It's a good thing to do for your company, and it's good to create them for your individual games. Awakened Realms creates communities around all of their games. Each game has their own dedicated community. You want to you want to talk about Tamashii and how it's going? There's a dedicated group to talk about that. That builds people who are invested in their games. It allows people to grow. It allows interest in your game to continue to grow. Those pages are suggested to others. They pull people in and they get people more invested. It's the same reason why any sort of competitive card game, like any sort of CCG, TCG, they live and die on how the communities are built. Because sure, you can have the best game ever. If you don't have organized play, if you don't have people who can engage and talk about your games and work with others and compare deck builds and actually play and interact with each other or even just talk about it, if you don't have that, then the game dies. It dies on the vine. It doesn't last. Or any TCG or CCG is built around organized play and they live or die based on organized play. And that idea can be translated into building communities around your game. Interest in Tamashii, or again, any game, in this case I'm just using Tamashii as an example right now, interest in Tamashii will grow because people see it on other people's pages. Someone who joined the Tamashii Facebook group when that campaign was active is now seeing people play with their games, and they're that much more motivated to play with their game, which means they'll post to Facebook, they'll share it with their friends. It builds interest, long-term interest. Community is such a huge thing that is so often not necessarily overlooked, but deprioritized. It is not the thing that you most, when you're juggling so many things on your crowdfunding campaign, you're trying to manage updates, you're trying to make sure that your VAT's taken care of. By the way, use Gamefound, we'll take care of your VAT for you. When you're trying to make sure that your shipping costs are low, and you're trying to do all these things, you're trying to playtest that scenario, all those things are important. Take 5 minutes and create your Facebook page for your game. Now, it is a double-edged sword. You obviously have to have a game that has enough of an interest that a Facebook group will be relevant, but that doesn't have to be thousands and thousands of people. It could be a few hundred people. But if you have that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that managed by you, you can have community members who are aware and engaged. There are very often people who will take up that charge because they're invested in your game. There's a person, an ISS Vanguard, there's a person, I want to say his name is Lindsay, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong in the name. But every single day, doing the ISS Vanguard campaign, before it started and continuously through it, he posted so much content about it. He created a website for the game. He created a website for ISS Vanguard. He collected all the various influencers who had any sort of content around the game. He organized that. He had full write-ups and blog posts about every single aspect of the game. He became such a huge charging force for the game, and so that's a big deal. And then going back to the company page, Orange Nebula, they had a few weeks ago, there was a bit of a snafu where one person was complaining about their game and how it was delayed or something, and the person was being, in my opinion, the person was being a bit unfair in the way they were presenting things. I would just say it that way, as a bystander. And the community had Orange Nebula's back. This person was attacking Orange Nebula because something was late, and the way he was engaging with it, I didn't think was great. But the community had Orange Nebula's back because they built a community who was passionately there to say, no, these are people who care. These are people who are present. These are people who apologize left, right, and center when anything goes wrong. These are people whose heart are in the game. These are people who, to their own pages, post the TV shows they're watching and they're interested in because they treat their community like actual friends. They just recently, for Spiritfire, they're posting updates of please give us suggestions for what kind of pet and companion you want to see in a game. They're engaging on the game, but they're engaging on just the fact that, hey, by the way, I started watching this TV show and I think it's great. How have you enjoyed it? That's like a personal connection to people, and it really has people there for you. It's some things take more time than others. Creating a page for your game group can have somebody else leading the charge. Creating your own company page, that might take more work, but it's work that will pay off in the long run, no differently than anything else. You can spend your time managing ads, or you could have Gamefound manage your ads and run your Facebook page. I'm doing good at these random plugs here. Okay, we go 5 for your projects. Okay, I believe LSG. Let's see, Soul Gamers. Gamefound's advanced over Kickstarter. Yes, Orange Nebula. Cam Bradley, I believe LSG is still quite active in the comments. I'm good. I'm glad to hear. I wish I had time to be as active as I used to be. I used to follow comments on campaigns so much more, and I'm less as aware as I used to be. But they used to be amazing, and I think they did a tremendous job, and with humor, by the way. They post updates, and they'll send you they'll send you 60 pictures of various miniatures, and each one will have its own dedicated humorous caption. Those things pay off. They take time, but so does everything when you're running a company, and it's so easy to deprioritize the things that don't seem essential, but they really are. Play Deliverance. 5 fewer projects means greater visibility. 6, organic push for some projects via blog posts. 7, built-in pledge manager. So 5 fewer projects means greater visibility. Yes, that is definitely true. I would say more than that, dedicated project focus means greater visibility. So for example, I think that I mentioned already, Kickstarter has a tabletop category. When I'm browsing the tabletop category on Kickstarter, I'd say I'm only interested in 5% of what they're showing me. I don't know why that is, but it's like 5%. When I'm browsing the tabletop category on Gamefound, I'm interested in 50% of what they're showing me. It's still not going to be everything. It never will be. But I'm interested in far more. And that a big part of that is just focus, meaning greater visibility has 2 components. One is the fewer projects you have, the more you see. 2 is more of a focus on what you're seeing. So as Gamefound continues to grow, as it takes over the tabletop category more and more, obviously there'll be more projects. So we'll lose some of that greater visibility. But I think we'll still have the focus. And I think the focus will help, even if it's not... Yeah, even if there's 60 projects instead of 20 projects, I think it'll still translate into greater visibility. Organic push for some projects via blog posts, via newsletter. We have a newsletter with 51% open rate, I believe is currently the last stats we have on that, which is huge. It's like 100,000 plus people, 51% open rate, and we push those projects. We push active projects, upcoming projects, pledge manager projects. We do pick things. In general, one of the double-edged swords of crowdfunding is anytime you as a platform are in any ways promoting something, you want it to be the thing that people are paying attention to already. If you show people things that nobody wants to see, and that sounds harsh, if you're showing things to people that people have already chosen to be less interested in, then you run the risk that your method of delivery is less paid attention to because it's not delivering the things people want to see. It's a decision I have to make all the time as a creator, as a YouTube creator, showing upcoming crowdfunding projects. Because if I show you, if I show you an active crowdfunding project that has 12 backers, I can do that here and there. If I do it too often, I run the risk that people start translating what I'm showing as, oh, you're showing things I won't be interested in. So there's always a delicate balance there, but there's that nice middle range, meaning you'll have the giants of, Chip Theory Games will put out Elder Scrolls and will be blasted across Gamefound's left, right, and center, all the various tools. And that will be blasted and shown either way. But it's the middle ground projects that benefit the most. It's the ones that, are looking at anywhere between $50,000 funding to, or even less than that, $30,000 funding versus, $500,000 funding. Those are the ones that will benefit the most from that additional push. They're still large enough for people to have that interest, but they get that additional visibility. Built-in pledge manager, 100%. It's part of the whole journey. What are you missing? So the marketing I mentioned, we like to say that Gamefound's an all-in-one platform. We have you covered from your pledge manager. We have you covered from your marketing, which is before the campaign, during the campaign, and after the campaign. We have you covered for crowdfunding, and we have you covered for pledge manager. We're there for everything that you want to cover, and whatever you don't want to do. If you want to do your own marketing and whatnot, then that's also a factor as well. Obviously, we're over here on Crowdfunding Nerds. There's a whole lot going on there as far as the marketing as well. Let's see. Build to Slim. Love contributing to games via polls, feedback before launch. Doing campaigns is great too, but it feels like backers get more upset then. Any thoughts? Doing campaigns. Backers more upset. Backers get more upset about the polls not going the way they want. Is that what you're saying? Polls are an interesting one, by the way. One of the questions I frequently get is, why does Gamefound not have updates that show up in your email? Why do you have to click on the link and go to Gamefound's updates? Part of the reason for that is the polls. The polls can't be delivered via the email. So if we want the polls to be done, it has to be done via the update, which is something I'd love to be able to at some point, kind of show the update and be like, go to the update for the poll. I don't know how, it's something I'd love to do at some point. But either way, polls and engagement are things that definitely do pull people in. Again, Awakened Realms does this on every single campaign. Which of these sculpts do you want to see more of? It feels like you're really, truly along for the journey. It feels like you're invested. I do agree that backers can get upset. Backers can get upset when something is not picked, especially if it was close. Although I would say in most cases, if you have the opportunity to do something. I mean, again, let's use sculpts as a good example. If you have a sculpt that comes in, 40%, 30%, and 10%, I'd say try to incorporate the 30% in your next poll too. Be like, hey guys, this was really close last time, so we're actually including the 30% one, but we're having more. Meaning, again, paying attention to your community, listening to feedback, and engaging with feedback correctly does involve making lots of judgment calls on the fly, which is not always going to be the most favorite thing to do during a crowdfunding campaign, but it can absolutely pay off. What options do creators? Nope, we go... Cam Bradley, as a backer, I feel like Backers PM has gotten a lot more user-friendly, although Gamefound is my preference. So, it's interesting. I have to think about the backer kit pledge manager. I've used both. As a backer, I've used both. I don't know if I've backed something on backer kit yet. No, I have. I backed Innovation. So I backed Innovation. But as far as the pledge manager aspect of things, I've used the pledge manager on both. I'd have to go through and compare my own experience. I think there are things I like about both. I think my instinct is towards Gamefound, although part of that might be biased because I use it more. I just find it's much more utilized in general. But yeah, both have their pros and cons. Play Deliverance. What options do creators have to incentivize backers to back or follow the project in Gamefound? Can you go over the available possible options? Oh, so a whole bunch of things. First of all, you follow a project, you can get a $5 credit on your page, or you get that miniature or that card or that pre-follow goal, whatever it is. So the first is giving a backer an individual reason to follow their campaign. If you follow this campaign, you will get something for doing so, assuming you back, of course. But just like, hey, if you back this project, you'll get this thing. Otherwise, it's going to cost you $5 later. Why wouldn't you want to do that? As a creator, whenever a campaign has a follow option like that, I actively encourage my audience to follow, because why wouldn't you? If you don't want to back, don't back. But if you think there's a single reason why you would want this game, why wouldn't you follow it to get the free thing? The only reason would be if you're specifically looking for reasons not to back things, to not be pulled in. Sometimes you can use that as a disincentive. Well, like, oh, if I was gonna get it for free, I'd back the game. But like, now that I'm not, now that I have to pay $5 for that mini, I won't. And that could be effective if you're trying to have self-control over things. Sure, that helps. But past that, generally, a direct follower notification, a direct follower incentive is a good thing in general. You can also do so through a shared funding goals, so to speak. Shared follower goals. Hey, this campaign, if we unlock 5,000 follows before the campaign launches, we'll be giving this miniature for free to everyone. I do find those are not as effective. It can still be good. It can lead to a sense of community, and it can lead to people sharing the project because they want others to follow. So it has a general pro in the sense that, and honestly, you could do both if you really want, or you have to balance your finances around what you can give away for free versus not, all those things. But the direct follower incentive is a direct sense of control and agency over the backer. I can follow this page and I can get this thing. When you make it about the community goal, you kind of, to a certain extent, you have people throwing up their hands and like, oh, like, sure, I'll follow maybe, but like, honestly, we'll hit 5,000 followers either with or without me. So you could have the sense of the person who mentally divests themselves from feeling attached to that action. Or the reverse is, you can have people who are like, no, I'm going to share this to the Board Game Revolution community because I want to get 7 more followers because we need to hit that number. So it can work for and against you. Both are very useful tools as far as incentivizing those. Gamefound is a better referral tracking than Kickstarter to help track ROI too. Oh, yeah, that's. I don't know if I'm as knowledgeable. I know about Gamefound's referral tracking. I don't know if I'm as knowledgeable about Backkits or Kickstarter to be able to compare them. The Brother Slim, no need to call out names, but can you share any big wins or missteps you've seen creators have when interacting with their community? Perhaps in response to a negative perception. So, the ones that come to mind immediately, first and foremost, are the big missteps. The kind of missteps that, to a certain extent, don't even need to be talked about because they're so bad. But, and I can think, like right now, I can think of a project that was on Gamefound that did this. I think of a project that's actively on Kickstarter doing this. But not engaging with your community when they have questions, like active questions when and the two I'm thinking of right now are their extremes. Meaning they're companies that walked away from the scene. On Gamefound, we were monitoring it because the project wasn't funding anyway, and we wanted to be very, very careful with the fact that there was no update in like 2 weeks from the creator, and we wanted to be very mindful of that. And if the project doesn't fund, there's nothing to worry about. But we were monitoring that one. But that's a big misstep. Do not walk away from your community entirely. Do not be there. Like literally, that's a huge misstep. It's not even. I don't even. Again, this is like it's like you're asking me for driving instructions, and I'm saying please don't crash your car. So I'm not sure if it's a good comparison. And similarly on Kickstarter right now, there's a project as well that there's a lot of questions about it. There's a lot of reasonable questions. It's $500,000 funded, and I don't know if Kickstarter plans on stepping in, but I think the project should be straight up canceled. They're not there. They've disappeared. It feels like a scam. I'm not saying it's a scam. It feels like there's every red flag under the sun. But again, that's a bad example. That's the don't crash your cars driving instructions. But I'd say along those lines, disappearing at all while you're engaging with things, even for a few days, is not the best thing to do ever. And I've seen it done a lot of times on a lot of campaigns where people have questions and the creators disappear for 2 days while they figure out how to answer those questions. The answers might be, hey, shipping costs seem really high. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with saying, we're looking into shipping costs right now. We hear your feedback. We can't guarantee that we will make any changes. We can't, but we are looking into this and we'll see what we can do. And even if you come back later and say, I'm so sorry, we tried, that's better than disappearing for 3 days while you show up later. 3 days later, you're like, by the way, we managed to drop shipping costs by $10 per person, but you've built up that ire, that frustration, that people are upset because you weren't there answering their questions and concerns. And I've seen that happen on a lot of projects. Not the total disappearance, but they're just like gone for 2 or 3 days as they figure out internally what to do. I think there's nothing wrong with saying, we see you, we hear you, we're in the middle of talking about things, we're in the middle of looking at what we can do, we cannot make guarantees or promises, but we are aware of your concerns. I've seen it on large creators. Again, I'm not going to name names here. I don't think it does any benefit, but I can think of a particularly very large campaign that was hundreds of thousands of dollars raised to a creator that is not a scam, the creator that has an audience and has a presence, and they disappeared for a few days. They disappeared while people had questions, and I was shocked at that. I was like, why are you not saying we're talking about things? And then they came back, and like people like were a little better, but always communicate. On Gamefound, we recommend you have at least, we recommend that you have regular updates. We have stats on having, how many updates do you have per week. You want to have a few updates a week in general. I think the number we recommend is at least 3 updates per week. There's nothing wrong with a daily update. There's nothing wrong with a daily check-in. I would say I would caution against updates that are not helpful unless you've committed to them. If you've committed to a daily update, then that's helpful because you told people you're going to do a daily update. You should do a daily update. By the way, whatever you commit to is a big deal in general, especially after the project. If you commit to monthly updates and you do every 3 months updates, that's not great. Versus if you tell people it's going to be every 3 months except when we have news, that changes the entire narrative. Follow through with what you're doing. I had this issue in my personal life just recently with some other project I was working on where I kept saying I would do something. I was overworked. I was juggling Gamefound, juggling YouTube, all these things, and someone else wanted something done. And I was like, oh, I'll try to get to it today. I'll try to get today. And then for 4 days I said I'll try to get today, and then didn't. And that was a mistake. That was a misstep. And then after I apologized, I said I should never have said that. I should have said I have too many things on my plate. I will try to get to it today, but I cannot make any guarantees. Even just that direct clarity completely changes the expectation on your end, and that's true for any updates you give. But so whatever you commit to, make sure you do. Past that, I think updates should involve information that is helpful because you want to train people that an update is something that is good and useful for them to look at and not fluff piece of like, hey, we are still going well and here's a miniature to look at. You want updates to in some way incentivize people to continue to look at the updates. Board Game Design Lab is a great place to start your conversation. The community is very helpful and generous. 100%. The communities in general, by the way. Like, there is so few, like, all the large communities in the tabletop space are generally very positive places to be. Like, board games in general, we have our share of drama at times, but I think overall, it's almost like fighting with family, if that makes sense. Where sometimes you, like, fight with family a little more than most because we're so close that we get on each other's nerves. I think that can happen in board games to an extent. And I think there are times where I wish people were a little less heated about stupid things. But overall, the groups are usually fairly well run. Discourse is usually guided and made sure that it's beneficial and productive and not just people attacking each other. I'm overall very impressed at the general board game ecosystem and all the groups they're in and how they're run and managed and how they're productive and beneficial places to be. I can't remember the name, but I remember the ISIS Vanguard site. Yeah, Cam. It's I think... I want to say like it was either Lindsay or Lyndon or something, Robert Lyndon maybe, I don't know. I remember the name, but like he just took charge. He took charge of ISIS Vanguard. Brain Escape Games. My favorite part of Gamefound is the preview page and Gamefound dealing with EU tax the project. Would love a category for roll and writes and digital creators. Now more people creating these. Do we not have a category for roll and writes? We should have a category for roll and writes. Digital creations, I agree as well, but I'm saying roll and writes to me, like I will look into that. We should have a category in roll and writes. One of the things I did when I first joined Gamefound, at one point earlier in the conversation, I was involved in a conversation around the categories on Gamefound, and if we don't have roll and writes, that's partially my fault. So I apologize for that. Play Deliverance. Case study time. Let's say you were pitching to me to bring the Deliverance expansion to Gamefound. What do you think are the top reasons I should go over there based on what you know about Deliverance? Oh, this is easy. Case study time. Okay, you gave me an easy one too, because honestly, sometimes the answer is, I can't. Sometimes the answer is, by the way, Kickstarter might be better for your platform, or Gamefound might be better, and Kickstarter might be better, but I can't give you a compelling reason. But Deliverance should absolutely be on Gamefound, and I'll go into it. So the first of all is just is the numbers in general. The average reprint campaign from Kickstarter to Gamefound does 70% more. That's across every single campaign that's ever been run on Gamefound. The average reprint campaign from Kickstarter to Gamefound does 70% more in increased funding. That's a good number. And you should ask, okay, great, but what does it do from Kickstarter to Kickstarter? So the answer is a little more complicated because I can't do every campaign on Kickstarter, so I just went through as many as I could. But the numbers that I have for Kickstarter to Kickstarter are 30% more, meaning the average reprint campaign from Kickstarter to Kickstarter does 30% more based on around 60 or 70 campaigns that I looked over. I didn't cherry pick anything, I just looked over campaigns, I got what I could, but Kickstarter has too much of history for me to have gathered all the data. So there is an asterisk on that data point, please take that into account. But in general, that's a very big disparity to just know before you even get into what type of game it is. But just across the board, that means the average reprint campaign is doing more on Gamefound. Now, by the way, fun fact, just to get into the numbers a little bit, the backer number is actually not as much of a growth. The backer number is like more, I don't remember the number for the backers, but it's more reasonable. But the average amount per backer goes higher, as does the backer number, and together you're just looking at 70% more compared to Kickstarter's 30% more. BackKit, I do have numbers for those, and they're not great. They're like 5% more, I think, but there's only like 4 campaigns to look at that fit that criteria, so it's a very small sample size. Please take that into account. And honestly, I ran those numbers before Gloomhaven, which would tank those numbers badly and unfairly. This is where data is complicated, because if I was running the numbers on BackKit right now, I would want to exclude Gloomhaven, because if you don't, that number is, because Gloomhaven technically is a reprint and expansion of Frosthaven. If you count it, like, that's the way I would count that, and that would drop you from 13 million down to 5 million, which is bad. But I would exclude that from the information. But either way, BackKit I don't think is in that conversation. So 70% versus 30%. That's before we get into anything else. But then separately from there, I'll say that your campaign, Deliverance, is a miniatures game. That Gamefound has done a good job at continuing to grow and expand the categories on Gamefound. They've done a good job at continuing to take the original crew of people who were there for ISS Vanguard and then slowly but surely build it out so that we have a what did we have? We had a recent campaign, Witch Stone or Witch Blood or something like that. That was a small choose your own adventure storybook for $40 that did like $100,000 plus. It may have done like 200,000. I don't remember offhand. But like we've managed to grow well past the original. We're here for miniatures and story only. We've managed to grow past that, but that still is a core audience on Gamefound. A miniatures game is a much easier sell to Gamefound is the right platform for you than it is for a what's it called, I don't know, a party game. Cyanide and Happiness is one of the only campaigns on Gamefound that I question whether it should have been on Kickstarter. I don't know for sure. But if I look at that, Master Data, which was Cyanide and Happiness, Master Data versus Trial by Trolley. Trial by Trolley did like 4 million on Kickstarter, and then Master Data did like 700,000, something like that on Gamefound. I do think a big part of that is the game. I don't think Master Data was remotely comparable to Trial by Trolley's appeal, but I do think that it is a party game, and that's a question mark of which platform could have done better. Versus you have things like ISS Vanguard, which did like a few $100,000 over on Kickstarter, and then did $930,000 over on Gamefound, and obviously Pledge Manager and all those things will continue to grow that number more and more as well. And that late pledge funding, by the way, when you're on the platform the whole way through, your late pledge funding numbers increase. Because again, you're being involved in the project the whole way through. Everyone who follows a potential backer, a potential cart waiting to be filled. And so your game, the numbers on average support reprints on Gamefound. They just do, and it's not a guarantee for you. One thing I tell people, I like to give people the count numbers too. I don't want to just sell you. Is 70% higher is the average, but 25%, I think maybe 24% of the campaigns that do a reprint will still fund lower. Meaning your average is going to be higher, but not everything's going to be higher. So you could have someone who does fund lower. That's a risk. That happens on Kickstarter too, by the way. On Kickstarter as well, it's the same idea that some percentage, I don't know the number offhand for that, but some percentage is going to be lower regardless. So even though the average is higher, it's not a guarantee for your campaign. But that combined with the miniature aspect, yeah, Deliverance's expansion should 100% be on Gamefound. But we can talk about that. Case study time. Expansion hits next year. Do you think there should be a limit to campaign page length? What should be focused on? Some of them are really long and still didn't even cover gameplay. Okay, for a second I thought you were talking about the length of the campaign. You mean campaign page length. So, I don't think there should be a inherent limit. Because it's a complicated conversation to get into, but in general, I am very wary of introducing limits to people that are really just limits for themselves. An example would be, on Gamefound, we highly recommend having your preview page up for at least a month. We highly recommend it. We incentivize it, we push it. If you're not doing it, we warn you. And ultimately, if you're not going to do it, you're not going to do it. Like, do I want to chase somebody away because the way their project works or the timeline for their project, whatever it is, do I want to, just because you're operating against your own best interests, do I want to send you away from the platform? And the answer is yes, if what you're doing is so bad that it reflects negatively on the platform. But I don't think campaign page length would fall into that category. I don't think it would reflect negatively on the platform, the same way I don't think a preview page not being up for a month doesn't reflect negatively on the platform. It just hurts your own campaign. I think a big part as well, and Kickstarter actually has finally added this as well, having the ability to scroll to section is a huge thing. I think the campaign page length issue is minimized when I can jump straight to where I want. You know when campaign page length bugs the heck out of me is when I'm trying to find shipping and I have to scroll to find shipping. That's where it's frustrating. When I can find shipping regardless, when you have your sections properly categorized and your page is a little longer than I'd personally like, I can deal with it. And the flip side is there are people who like that information. And there are, sometimes it's just with the visuals. Dice Stone right now, over on Kickstarter, they're doing incredibly well. The visuals on that entire page, the entire way down, are just sparkling. Sparkling visuals. Every time you scroll, there's another reason to back that campaign. Sometimes campaign page length can really pull people in if you do it right, just because the shininess doesn't stop. And so you kind of want to be pulled in by the shininess. So I do think that... and then as far as some of them don't cover gameplay, every time a campaign does not cover gameplay, it's a huge issue. Jeremy Howard has what he likes to call... Jeremy Howard, a content creator, man of his meeple, he has what he likes to call the 3-scroll test. And the 3-scroll test is when you scroll once, twice, and 3 on your mouse wheel, and if you're not even talking about how the game plays by then, he's like, why? You're all these things, you're telling me about your shiny dice, you're telling me about your foil cards, you're telling me about all these other things, and then you don't even talk about the gameplay. So, yeah, I think you should have the gameplay. And again, sections are good for that, but I think you should have gameplay. Ruse Games. The newsletter this morning mentioned Ruse Active Pledge Management has already resulted in new pledges. Thanks. I'm glad. I had nothing to do with that on a personal level, but I'm very glad that it happened. Brother Slim, when it comes to creating video content without a great recording setup, do you think it's better to invest in the equipment or outsource to influencers? Oh, outsource to influencers. Almost a million times over. There's nuances to that answer because it depends on how bad your video setup is. I think there is charm to a creator talking directly about their game, but it has to be at least some level of quality. For myself, as a backer, when I'm watching a gameplay video filmed by the creators that's done horribly, it's not great. As a content creator, I've traveled to a lot of other creators, and I have frequently been disappointed with how bad the video quality can be at some of these companies. And I'm like, I wish I was filming this in my own set. Like, the camera's blurry, the audio's not as good. I've had so many issues with creators who are large creators, and I'm always so mindful. I'm like, I want the video production to be good. I want these videos to look good because that keeps people invested. Again, The Witcher, go on board right now. If you want an example, go on board, who actively have the Witcher campaign, who is currently at $750,000. I have it on my screen over there. The Witcher campaign at $750,000 to go on board. They do some incredible production. And so you have the charm that it's their company, it's their people. Although, even then, there's also a double-edged sword there, because I think that does help, but it also means that there's some degree of like, oh, it's them promoting their own game, but I think it's still more helpful than not, especially when you're talking about the journey, when you're giving, like, creator updates, creator vlogs. Come On will have Michael Chanel, popping onto various, updates about the different things, talking about the design diary. I think looping in the creator, looping in the designer, looping in your own people is good, but there needs to be some bare minimum of quality for people to watch and engage and enjoy. Steamforged Games, they've occasionally done sets of, full dedicated playthroughs with, like, properly filmed, and I think those are great if the quality's there. I've seen a bunch of campaigns that have had just the creator trying to do the best they can with not great production. And by the way, and if cost is a factor, in fact, let's use this as our pivot to influencers. I don't exactly know how long this is going to be, but let's pivot to influencers so we can at least cover it to some extent. But influencers, there are so many influencers out there who are happy to cover your game and can do so anywhere between decently and great. And many of them are free. Many of them are free. There are influencers and content creators you pay for, and there are influencers and content creators who are free. There's a different level of expectation. Sometimes it's a different level of delivery. Sometimes it's about getting the content you want. There are all different conversations. But you should not have a hard time finding people willing to cover your game, and you should not have a hard time finding them for free. And if it's about the audience, sometimes you're paying for the audience, and that's fair. But if you as a creator are putting out content in your game, then you're clearly not paying for the audience in that case. You're just trying to get an end result. And you can get that end result from a million small to mid-sized creators who are happy to cover your game for free. And so reaching out to content creators, engaging with content creators along the way I think that if your own quality is great, that's fine. I think you should still work with content creators and still have influencers involved. But for sure, if your quality is not great. Dre Inc. Hi, Alex. If you were to debate the pros and cons of the main tabletop crowdfunding platforms with a representative from each platform, which platforms do you think should be involved? I think Backit and Kickstarter. I think Game on Tabletop is interesting because they've been around, they've been involved, but I don't think they're in the. I think I'd be happy to have them involved in such a conversation, but I just don't think they're currently in the public lexicon of the debate. And I think GoFundMe, I don't think anyone thinks of them as being relevant to this. And what's the other one? Oh my gosh, there's another one. There's GoFundMe and I'm blanking on it. But the other thing that's like GoFundMe that has done the occasional crowdfunding campaign, but I think it should be Backit, Gamefound, and Kickstarter would be the current conversation. And even then, again, I think is really right now. I think it's primarily no. I think Backit should be involved. I think even though the tabletop space they are not as much of a competitor. I think in RPGs they are, and in other areas they might be. So like I think those three are the ones I'd encourage. Trader Inc., what are the three most important topics you would want to cover? That's a good question. If we were talking about competing crowdfunding campaigns, what are the three most important topics to cover? I think audience, I think is a huge one. You can't ignore it. Features in general. Audience, features. I'm not sure. Like, I mean, features is a catch-all. It's a catch-all category, which is the tricky part. But I think audience, features, maybe community. I mean, I'm cheating a bit because I'm using the topic of this conversation, but I don't know if community is a feature, and it's also not an audience. So yeah, let's go with that. Let's go with audience, features, and community. Like, how do all three do in those three different categories? Board Game Revolution. Do you think Gamefound will ever implement any sort of standards or limitations on projects to protect backers from possible disingenuous campaigns? I think we do that now. So Gamefound in general, and I think all platforms have some degree. The question is what kinds of standards come into place. And it's tricky because you can't ever know perfectly. Gamefound does actively look into projects and makes decisions about what projects will be present on the platform based on a variety of features. I have been involved in conversations where I'm trying to convince our securities team to let a project through because I want them on the platform and I'm not worried. And our team's like, nope. And I'm like, but they're saying they won't use us if we don't let them through. And our security team's like, doesn't matter, they didn't hit their criteria. Now, the criteria are not the same across the board. There's a difference between, like for instance, like a good example is your first project. If you have a repeat track record of launching projects and delivering projects, we will give you more leeway than if you show up, launch a project, and before your first project ever delivers, you're already launching your second, third, and fourth project. So there are different degrees of standards depending on who you are, depending on what your track record is. So the standards are not across the board a singular standard. But we do have standards, and even if the creator threatens to not use us, to use Kickstarter, which we've had happen, I've been present in those conversations, we just say, okay, that's fine. We're not here to compromise on what we believe are the security aspects of a project just to get you on board. We don't think that will serve us in the long run. We don't think it'll serve crowdfunding in the long run. We're not here to do that. And so we do frequently have conversations around standards, limitations, all those things. That said, it's not a perfect answer, especially when you have a track record. Mythic Games is obviously going to be the elephant in the room in these conversations, but Mythic Games, they had multiple projects in the queue, but so does everyone else. So did Command, so did, so do Little Magnet Studios, so does Awakened Realms. There's so many companies, so does Colossal Games. There are so many companies that have multiple projects in the queue and are able to deliver and keep those going and are able to do just fine. And then you have Peterson Games and Mythic Games, and you have a few people who aren't able to juggle that, but you can't always know that in advance. Gamefound will always do the best it can to protect the community. We push people for realistic funding goals. We look into your conversations and your finances and what goes on, I mean, with your consent and everything, but we have standards in place. Very often when we're talking to a creator who wants to launch their next campaign, but their last campaign's about to deliver, but they're trying to get that, before we approve it, we'll be like, show us the miniatures, show us the printed material, show us your game at least exists. We will have conversations with people. We have standards because we don't want crowdfunding. Selfishly, I'm not even saying for the greater good, also for the greater good, but selfishly for the platform. It's not good if people view crowdfunding as a hit or miss conversation. And right now the numbers are still good, but there's definitely been a perception of a weakening of how those numbers are. We talked earlier about involving your creators in the story. A good area to involve people in the story. If you want to build community, if you want to build confidence, talk about, when you are a creator and you're talking about crowdfunding, talk about your own concerns about how things have been and how you as a creator are approaching it. Like, hey, we want to make sure that we don't end up in a situation where we let you down. And so here are the things we're doing. What else do you think we should do? Talking about the safety and security of your own campaign to your community, that will tell your community you're not just here for a quick check. It'll tell your community that you are mindful of the steps needed to be taken to be able to put things in place. You can have a conversation. You can be like, what about our funding goal? Is it a fake funding goal? No, here's why it isn't. Here's why it is or isn't. Or you could even say it is, which might get you in trouble, but you could say, like, you know what, honestly, our funding goal right now is actually $30,000. We're putting $20,000 because we know the data, and we know that, if you're running a platform, if you're running the campaign on Gamefound, on average, your campaign will get somewhere between 30 to 50% increased funding. So we are monitoring the situation. We want to be transparent with you that this is the situation. Like, it's a little risky to say your funding goal's fake. It is risky, I'll warn you of that. But it might build up a genuine connection to the audience of them understanding the nature of where things really are. Have these conversations with the community. It will build confidence. If I felt short with the shipping I felt short with the shipping settings. Will it eventually be possible to assign shipping costs to more specific regions? Average fee for an entire continent create frustration for many backers. I'm not as confident on where our shipping options are right now. It's been a while since I looked at them, so I'm not as equipped to answer those as I would like to be. But my general answer would be we always want to make everything better. So I have to take a look at that. Board Game Revolution. How do you feel about fake, unrealistic funding goals? People do this just so they can stay funded in 1 second. Oh, well, I just covered that to a degree. How do I feel about fake, unrealistic funding goals? So I just filmed a video today for my own channel about a different issue in crowdfunding right now. I don't know if that video goes up, but it goes up in like 1 week or 2 weeks. But I compared an issue to fake funding goals and why one bothers me more than the other. The answer of, there's going to be 2 answers. There's going to be how I feel about fake funding goals, and then we'll give the Gamefound answer. I feel fake funding goals are an unfortunate and sad reality of the state of crowdfunding. Meaning I don't like the idea ever that the thing to do is to lie to your audience. I hate it. I think it's horrible. I also recognize that the reality is that sometimes a fake funding goal lie is an innocent lie that if you don't engage with it, it will hurt your funding, it will hurt the chance of the project to going well. And if you are willing to engage in that potentially harmless lie, it might just be better overall. Because if everyone's directly honest about their funding goals, I think it will result in more frustration. But I hate saying that. It feels dirty. And it feels genuinely dirty to engage in the idea that a fake funding goal is a lie that so many companies have to engage with. Now, the larger companies, you know, the Commons, the Awakened Realms, the Steamforged, they have the luxury of not having to. You can put your $300,000 funding goal. I mean, The Witcher right now has a $75,000 funding goal. They could have put $300,000. Nobody would have cared. Nobody would have blinked an eye. It would have been funded in 2 seconds anyway. So larger companies don't have that concern. And if you're running a smaller card game, $10,000 funding goal might be legitimate. But anywhere in between, there's this risky middle area where a fake funding goal, a slightly illusionary of a funding goal, is a problem. Now, what I don't like, so again, my overall opinion there is I hate that I have to even say it, but I think sometimes it is a lie that I don't like the fact that's present, but I think it makes sense to engage with it from a practical sense, not necessarily from a moral sense. And companies who have tried not doing fake funding goals have found themselves hurt in the process at times. I do think there are ranges, and that's a big thing. And again, this is all my own opinion before we get to the Gamefound stance of things. But I think that there are ranges of funding goals. So for example, there are campaigns that have a funding goal of $20,000 and then raise $100,000 and they cancel. That is not okay. There is a range of how betrayed your community will feel when your funding goal doesn't work. Because a big part of it is knowing and understanding the numbers. If you know that your Gamefound campaign is going to, raise 35%, let's say day one on average, well, great. Go ahead and put a $30,000 funding goal there. If you really need $100,000, put $50,000. Put $50,000 as your funding goal for day one, and you really need $100,000. That's fine. And you know what? If day one you don't hit the $50,000, you can walk away or cancel or reiterate. Meaning, let's say you hit $20,000 day one. Well, you're not at 50, but you're also not at 100. You're neither, but you know by now that there's a problem. And so you can walk away today and it doesn't cause the issue. There's ways to engage with the quote-unquote innocent lie while also not engaging in the sense of betrayal that are present. And those ways are understanding the nature of the crowdfunding cycles and utilizing your funding goals as a metric that you can monitor day one and react accordingly before there's a sense of betrayal. So I think there are ways to do it. I think when you have a $20,000 campaign that makes $115,000, and you're like, by the way, we actually need more, I think that's a problem. So that's my own opinion is keep it in the realm of reasonableness and try to engage with it proactively, and I think it makes sense. As far as Gamefound stance, we talk to creators. We encourage them to use as accurate a funding goal as possible. If we see them using something that is problematic, we straight up will give them a very hard time about it. We are not interested in having campaigns. We've had it happen. It's not good. And we've had it happen where a campaign will cancel after overfunding, and it's not a good look for the campaign. It's not a good look for Gamefound. It's not a good look for crowdfunding in general. And so we are actively on top of it. There's no way to fully enforce a fake funding goal, and I will not pretend that we chase them down to the last dollar every single time. But we actively push and encourage them to get as close to a realistic funding goal as possible. And if we know that it's way off, that is where we'll really push back. Roos Games, thanks for doing this. Anytime. Bob, do you have any plans for an open forum to try to encourage gamers and game publishers to hang on, develop relationships, discuss upcoming games, etc.? Not currently. There's nothing that we don't entertain on Gamefound side as far as things we do. We have a lot of ambitious plans in the works. We have a lot of small plans in the works. We have a lot of everything in the works. an open forum of creating Gamefound as a sense of community. There are many things that are in the works that are larger scale that we just want Gamefound to always be. For right now, I would say that the best place for those things are the Facebook groups that currently exist. They do a great job. They are excellent in many ways. If or when Gamefound starts to encourage Gamefound being the main hub, a BGG full of forums and all those things, that's something that may well happen in different ways, but it has to be something that serves the needs of the community. It has to be something that in some way is beneficial to the community, because if it's not, it won't take off. So we have to find that value added, make it work as such. I'm not going to say it's not going to happen. I would love for it to happen. We just need to do it right, and doing it right means that right now it's not the current priority. Cam Bradley, Witchbound? Yes, Witchbound, that's the one. There's so many. There's Witchblood, there's Witchstone, there's Witchbound. There's a lot of witch games. Moose games, well, I guess that was 3, but they all sound the same. Appreciate the EU VAT handling. Will this be expanded to UK VAT and US GST? Is it not? Don't we... I'm pretty sure we have all the taxes in place. I could be wrong with that. We should for sure have UK VAT. I hope I'm not missing anything. We sure should have UK VAT, but I'm pretty sure we have all the US tax rates in there as well. Do you mean handling versus submitting it? I think it should be there. Giles, some big companies have problems bringing them to close. Some big companies have problems bringing them to close or worse, to ransom for your pledge. In this climate, okay, fine. In this climate, how do you think we can reassure the backers? I think not ignoring it is a big deal, unfortunately. I think right now there are... For the most part, crowdfunding is still a very safe place. But the way I constantly put it is that at the end of the day, every time something bad happens, you lose some percentage of people. If you have 100% of people backing a game, you have 10,000 backers backing a game, and that company folds, sure, 9,500 of those people may continue to come back to crowdfunding because they've backed a lot of projects, and this is one project. It's not going to stop them. But 500 people leave, and that will happen. I don't know if there's a lot you can do to convince them it won't leave. I think the biggest thing you can do to reassure your backers is to be mindful of your own backlog, be mindful of your own timeline, how you've done things. Like if you have, just to give a random example, okay? So let's use, I don't want to give companies a hard time here, so I'm going to try to avoid. I will avoid using examples here. But let's say you have Company A and Company B. Company A has 4 projects in the queue. Company B has 4 projects in the queue. Company A has been delivering their projects roughly on time for the past 3 years. Company B has consistently been a year late on every single project. Company B is going to have a much harder time reassuring their backers that you should trust them on their next campaign. Your own timelines are a factor. It's easy and fun to put, hey, your campaign's delivering in a year. It's easy to put that. And if that's going to deliver in a year, that's great. And if it won't, it's not the end of the world if it won't. But if you have a bunch of active projects and they're all delivering late, it's going to be hard to convince people that there's a reason to trust you. Awakened Realms does one thing. Awakened Realms is it's a very, very big point, and it's worth, if you are a company that can say the same thing, you should do so. But Awakened Realms in their campaigns, they have a little disclaimer. They don't make a huge deal of it, but they have a little thing in their campaign. Throughout the entire shipping crisis, we never once asked backers for a single cent more. We delivered campaigns. We did what we needed to do. We didn't ask you for more money. Because so many companies did ask for more money, and I'm sympathetic to those that did. But there's those that ask for more money, and there's those that really ask for more money, and then there are those that should have folded. The ones that ask for a little money, I'm sympathetic. I understand the reality of what the world went through. Hard times call for hard decisions. I respect that. But also there are companies that didn't ask for a cent more. Arcane Wonders never asked for a cent more from any of their backers on the giant box that Foundations of Rome is. There are companies that can say that, and they should say so proudly in their campaign. We understand that crowdfunding has had its ups and downs in this past year. We want you to know that we here at Company X have always done our best to keep you taken care of, and we have consistently shown that we have taken care of, we have prioritized, we have sucked up those additional costs ourselves doing hard times, and we understand and respect that not all companies could do so. But we have a sense of obligation to you, to our backers, to our community, and so we did. We've lost money on projects, but it was important to us to follow through on what we said, and we hope you trust us to continue to do so. Those are statements that not every company can make. But if you can make it, own it. Recognize it, address it, put it in your things. Build that sense of trust. Again, be authentic, be transparent. Do all these things. So it'll help you out. Bob Giles. Dre Inc. Audience features and community are great topics. Yes. Chris Couch Gaming. Let's say you have a game that funded on Kickstarter and now have all your copies in hands. Can you create a Gamefound campaign to attract a new audience, sell copies, plus offer an exclusive item? Ooh, we're getting into fine lines here. So I'll tell you what you can do and I'll tell you what you can't do, and your question probably falls somewhere in the middle, which means you might have to speak to our team that approves projects. The first thing you can't do is you can't run a campaign on Kickstarter, then run the exact same campaign on Gamefound. We don't let it. You can do it in the reverse because we can't stop you, and Kickstarter doesn't have that policy. So if you want to run a campaign on Gamefound and then go to Kickstarter to get more backers, be our guest. That's not, I'm not saying I encourage it, but we're not going to stop you. But you can't go from Kickstarter to Gamefound. What you can do is you can come back to Gamefound and you run a project later and go ahead and say, by the way, it's a year from now and we're doing an expansion and reprint, or even just a reprint. You can do a reprint campaign on Gamefound later. I know I shouldn't say, I want to be careful here. I can get myself in trouble here, but I'm pretty sure we have run just reprint campaigns with nothing extra. At the very least, I know Awakened Realms has done it with the Great Wall. There was nothing extra there. There was just like an updated rule book. So like even that might be enough. Like, hey, we tweaked some aspects here. So it might be, you might need a reason, and the reason might need to be small. The questions are going to be, the main questions you're going to have to deal with, and this is where it gets into vague areas, are recency and how big are the changes. Those are the two factors that are at play. If there's not a lot of changes and it's very recent, you can't do it. If there's a lot of changes and it's not at all recent, you totally can do it. Changes and or additions, I should say. So the question is the middle ground. If your campaign was 3 months ago on Kickstarter and you're offering a promo now, you'll have to speak to our team. It is a fine line, and there are not hard and fast answers. Sometimes there's a judgment call as to, do we feel that Gamefound is being used purely as a marketing service, or do we feel that Gamefound is in some way bringing something new to life? So I don't have a direct answer. Dre Inc. Hey Alex, I am also a co-host on the Meeple Surf Show. We have already had a rep from Kickstarter. Would you be willing to come to the show and talk about Gamefound? Of course, anytime. Bring me on board. I love talking about it. I took the job at Gamefound a long time ago, well, a year plus ago, because I believed in Gamefound. When I first heard about Gamefound, this is a little personal, but when I first heard about Gamefound, my first reaction was, what in the world is Awakened Realms doing? Who thinks that they can go ahead and compete with Kickstarter? That's such a silly thing to do. Like, it's such a silly thing to compete with Kickstarter. They're the giant in the room. No differently than anyone who tried to create a site that would compete with Board Game Geek. I'm like, why? Why are you trying? They are an elephant. They are a giant. It's so hard to do that. And then I heard what Gamefound's plans were. Like, I immediately, I saw their blog post and I was like, oh, this all makes sense. These are all excellent points. I want this to succeed. Before I ever worked there, I did an interview with Marcin, and like when they first announced it, I was so enthralled by, I believed in the promise of what Gamefound was doing, of the idea of a crowdfunding campaign that wasn't sitting there stagnant for 10 years, just doing the same thing again and again, but actually trying to build the best platform for a very large, tabletop crowdfunding is one of the biggest, if not the biggest section of crowdfunding. It should be treated with respect. And so I believed in Gamefound. So I'm always happy to hop on any interview. Sean Bradford, can someone exclude VAT from the pledges plus charge it later in the PM? I have to double check. I'm not an expert on the VAT stuff. I know our general VAT stuff. I'm always wary of saying the wrong thing there. Sean, as far as I know, GM includes it doing the live campaign. What's GM? I'm not sure what GM is. Ruse Games submit, sorry. Luke Pryor, we do not require a campaign to have anything extra. It just needs to have been delivered if it's a reprint. Good to know. Thank you, Luke, for chipping in. I appreciate it. Play Deliverance. What incentives do you guys offer as a company for games to use the guys over Kickstarter? Is this a private discussion between you and the company? Only if you want it badly, or do you not do this? So I'll give you some general answers. The general answers is, it's not going to be specific answers, but it will be general answers, nothing crazy. We will, okay. It's always tricky having these conversations. So the answer I'll give is that the first thing is, we do offer incentives to creators to come to the platform. We absolutely do. That is something that I will not guarantee will be forever, but at the very least, just to give an example, if in 3 years, 90% of people are using Gamefound because it's the platform of choice, there's less of a reason for us to offer an incentive if you're anyways going to use us, because you're going to get higher funding, more backers, all those things. But right now, we're still in that growth phase, which means we are incentivized to have you come to the platform. The practical reality is we can't make that offer for everyone. A campaign that's going to have 30 backers and raise $3,000 is not the same level of draw for the platform. It doesn't help bring other companies on board. The companies that we are going to try to encourage, to try to get them on board more, are going to be companies that, practically speaking, we believe help contribute to the overall perception and growth of the platform. When you have a $300,000 campaign on Gamefound, that makes Gamefound look better. It makes it be more of a draw, that people are looking there more, because we have, 20 active campaigns that are very big, popular campaigns. And so that is something that we are interested in continuing to encourage, while we continue that uphill battle to, tilt the ratio of how much of the market we have and all that. So yes, we will offer incentives. What kind of incentives? it ranges a lot. They change too. We change our incentive structure on a regular basis. We'll usually have like to the creators we're talking to, we'll be like, hey, here's the incentive thing, but like we're trying to lock in our plans for 2023. You know, here's the situation. Here's what we can offer, and that's true if you sign by this point. When it goes to the next phase, there's the next incentive thing, and those range based on how we're doing on our projects. Practically speaking, the more projects we have lined up, if we have a very rocking third quarter, we don't need to chase the third quarter campaign as much. If we have a down fourth quarter, well, we want to get you on board because we don't want the platform to be empty. So the answer is it's a realistic conversation about trying to ensure that we constantly have campaigns, constantly have interest, constantly have attention. We do structure our incentives based on how things are currently looking to an extent, and we'll work with you on those things. But they do vary, so I don't have direct answers. They'll generally involve, the general aspects are, it'll usually involve degrees of promotion, you know, things we can do as far as newsletter editions, top banner placement, things like that are general promotion within the site, possibly, you know, possibly taking some of the funds raised and redirecting it towards marketing and Facebook spend and stuff like that, possibly just cutting some of your fees, like, hey, lower pledge manager fees. At the end of the day, there'll still be costs, but we'll do what we can to get you on board, and the larger you are, the more negotiating power you have. It's a practical reality. I always like hate saying these things because it feels like you're like being mean to small creators, and it's not that. It's that the larger you are as a creator, the more negotiating power you have, that you're adding value to us, even as it's a mutually beneficial arrangement. Sean, Gamefound, yep, Luke Pryor, Sean, being able to include or not include value specific to where a creator comes from, where it's shipping from, and where it's shipping to, it's not a simple answer. Luke, I should have you here for every live stream I ever do. You're so helpful. Thank you. But I think that's where we are with things. We're caught up. It's been an hour and 20 minutes. I believe. I don't know exactly how long this was called for. What was this called for? I don't remember how long this was called for. Let me go to the channel thing. But I think we'll go ahead and wrap this up at the moment. Should I wrap it up or should I dive into... Let's spend 2 minutes on influencers. I'll spend 2 minutes on influencers and then we'll wrap up because we really focused a lot more on community and then general Q&A over influencers. Influencers are one thing I'll say that a frustration I see frequently from creators. I'll just touch upon a frustration and we'll go from there. Is communication with influencers, with the content creators that you're using. I hate the term influencers, by the way. I like the term content creators. The difference, let's go into a small tangent about the difference between a content creator and an influencer. A content creator is someone who's creating content, and their goal is to inform their audience in some way, shape, or form. An influencer, I don't like that term because to me that means that your goal is to sell your audience. Your goal is to influence, not to provide value, if that makes sense. So I just don't like the term. It's more of a pet peeve on my end. But the content creators you're working with, I've often seen pet peeves from creators around communication with content creators. They shipped out 20 prototypes and they had 3 people actually cover the game. And every time I see a post like that, I'm like, what in the world happened? Who are these people? And am I like a day late on my coverage, and am I one of those people? Because like it's very rare that I'm late on coverage on the YouTube channel, on Board Game Co's YouTube channel. It's very rare that we are late on coverage, but it has happened once in a while. Maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 times a year, a video might be 2 or 3 days late into the campaign just because of timelines. And so I'm always terrified when that's like they talk about me. But I think the biggest thing with any content creator you're working with is communication and expectations. I think it's and I've had this issue on mine as well. Recently we had a game that we covered on the Board Game Co channel that the creator, 2 weeks before the campaign, the creator reached out with a very upset email saying, why wasn't the video done yet? And I was like, and this is maybe on me as well. Not maybe, no, it's partially on me too. It's on both sides. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. The campaign's in 2 weeks. He's like, yeah, but the video should be done. I'm like, that's not the general expectation. I just assumed you'd want it like in day 1 or possibly week 1 or whatever it is. Like I'd never assumed you wanted it 2 weeks before the campaign. Like no one had that conversation. And I think that's a big thing to realize as a creator when you're working with any content creator. The biggest thing, whether it's paid or unpaid, is communication. Communication and expectations. And by the way, a pet peeve I have as a content creator is the amount of times that a campaign is pushed back and I'm not told. When someone says, hey, by the way, this campaign's going up October 24th, I film the video, I schedule the video, it's on my schedule, and then it goes up October 24th, and multiple times this has happened where the creator's like, can you take the video down? It's not supposed to go up. It's not supposed to go up. I'm like, you said the campaign is October 24th. We changed it. You didn't tell me. So like, there is communication and expectations are the biggest thing, and this is true for paid or unpaid coverage that you're working with. Communicate to the content creator when the campaign is. Communicate when there are changes. Communicate or ask, either one, when you expect the video to be. You can ask them. You can say, hey, by the way, we'd love your opinion on when do you think the video should go up. Or you can say, we'd love to have your video go up, anywhere after this date is okay. If you don't say those things, if you say, here's the game, and the campaign is October 24th, and you don't give them a blackout date, and they post their video October 1st, that's on you. it is partially on them too. It is. It's on both sides. They, as a content creator, you should ask these questions. You should. But as a creator giving that over, you need to be as clear as possible with expectations. If you are engaging in unpaid coverage, before you send out that $200 prototype, you should clarify, just to be clear, like, hey, by the way, this is something that we do have limited prototypes. The prototypes are very expensive. Can you guarantee coverage? And that one, by the way, if you send someone a prototype and they don't clarify that they might not cover it, that's why I think it's on the content creator. But you can still limit that by being as clear and transparent as possible. You can limit that by choosing people who clearly have a reputation for putting up videos and getting out their content. You choose an unknown personality, you're taking more of a risk. That is a factor. And I'm not saying don't choose small channels. I'm saying there's a difference between a small channel that regularly has content versus someone you've never heard of or worked with before. And those are different things to be mindful of. Communication is going to be the biggest thing that I would highly, highly recommend, that when you are working with a content creator of any kind, be very clear and communicative about everything. Even payment timelines. If you're working with them on payment, be clear as to, if you have any concerns whatsoever about payment, be clear what your goals are. Hey, no problem. Happy to work with you on your rate. What are your rates here? What's your rate sheet? By the way, just so you know, like, we only pay after the video is done and launched. Please let us know if that's the case. Another thing that's worth doing, a big thing that's worth doing, is if you want day one coverage for your video, because I've seen this happen with other creators. Fortunately, I've not had this happen myself, but I've seen this happen with other creators. If you signed up for a $500 preview with Creator A, and Creator A is only going to do his preview midway through the campaign, and you wanted it day one, try to make that clear. Try to make it clear, hey, by the way, we are looking for the preview to be done on day one. And, like, if it's not, that's something that, like, we come up with a tiered rate or something. Or, like, unfortunately, like, you know, we can only pay half price if it's not done by this date. Or we can't pay at all. Be clear. And sometimes it's tricky because it's not always worth getting into those. The hard part, though, is if you're a creator and you get your $500 preview midway through the campaign, technically they delivered on the job, but also not really. So you're in a hard spot where you don't want to be a jerk. But if you clarify those things up front, you can get them out of the way. Like, be like, hey, and by the way, one of the things you can always do is you can rely on past issues as a reason why you're traumatic, if that makes sense. Meaning you can sit there and say to a creator, hey, like, I'm assuming this won't be an issue at all. Unfortunately, we've had bad experiences in the past. We do need this video day one, and if it's not there day one, we unfortunately can't pay for it, or pay less for it, whatever it is. You can use past negative experiences as a reason why you are gun shy. That way you don't come across as someone who's too anal or problematic. You come across as somebody who's been hurt in this area before, and so you're being more mindful. But yeah, expectations in general are a huge thing across the board. Play Deliverance, thanks for answering all questions. Bob, sorry this has been asked. I was a bit late to the Q&A. How is Gamefound trending traffic-wise to compete with Kickstarter's numbers since inception to encourage more creators to make the move to Gamefound? So, well, Play Deliverance, I did say that, but let's give some more information. So I'll give this one last answer. I estimate Kickstarter. Ooh, I'm interested in that number. So Play Deliverance, I'm very interested in that number because the last time at PAX East was the last time I saw Kickstarter's handing out a pamphlet that said they have 7 million active users a month. Okay, 7 million active users. So I don't have any numbers outside my own estimations of that. I haven't looked into it further, but I assumed that I ratioed that to the tabletop category, which would be much less than 3 to 4.5 million. Meaning it would be much less. If you're 7 million active users a month, the tabletop category would be much less than that. Meaning I thought they were more par than what you're saying. I'm very curious about the 3 to 4.5. I'm very curious about that number because, yeah, that's just a guess on my part. But yeah, so Kickstarter's own numbers is 7 million active users a month. That is across the entire platform, not across the tabletop division, which I believe tabletop is around 30% of the numbers, if I recall correctly, but I'm not certain about that. But that is that. We have Roberto finishing us off with communication is the most important thing for every aspect in, I have a little heart icon that's blocking me reading that word, in business. There we go. Business, like it's on my chat, whatever, in my humble opinion. I do not disagree at all. Communication is key in so many things. In any case, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this live stream. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate all of you being here and asking questions, being engaged, all those things. Good luck on your next campaigns, whatever they are, wherever they might be. Very much on my side of things, I always try to encourage people to use the right platform, the right tools for where things are. So, yeah. And then I see Play Deliverance saying 7 million overall, 40%. Looks like there's only 2.8. Yeah, so that's where, yeah, so we are working with the same data set, just different end result. So meaning I do think Kickstarter is higher, but it's a question of exactly how much. But yeah, with that, we're going to go ahead and end this up. Thank you so much, and good luck to everything you do. And I'm going to wander awkwardly over to the button where I press my end stream.